The afternoon sun beat down on Callum Mercer's broad shoulders as he pushed his 5-year-old daughter Ivy on the swing set. His back ached from leaning under the hood of a Chevy truck for most of the day, and his muscles protested with each push. The neighborhood park sat empty on this Tuesday afternoon, just the way he liked it. No other parents to make small talk with, no other kids for Ivy to compete with for the swings. Just the two of them under the Texas sky, the air still heavy with summer heat despite it being late September. After a 10-hour shift at Mike's auto shop, his hands were still stained with grease despite the thorough scrubbing he'd given them. The black lines etched into his calloused palms had become a permanent feature over his 15 years as a mechanic. He'd changed into a clean gray t-shirt before picking up Ivy from kindergarten, but the smell of motor oil still clung to him, mixing with the scent of cut grass from the park. "Higher, Daddy," Ivy squealed, her blonde pigtails bouncing with each push. Her small hands gripped the chains so tight her knuckles whitened, but her face showed nothing but pure joy. Callum smiled, his weathered face softening at the sound of her laughter. The lines around his eyes, usually furrowed in concentration as he worked, relaxed as he watched his daughter soar through the air. This right here was why he worked so hard. For these moments. For her future. For the college fund that grew a little each month. For the stability he'd never had as a kid. "Hold on tight, kiddo," he warned, giving her another gentle push. His rough palms connected with her back, careful not to push too hard. He glanced at his watch. 4:30 p.m. He had promised to have dinner ready by 6 o'clock when Marin got home from her shift at the local diner. 10 more minutes, then we head home, okay? Ivy didn't respond. The swing slowed as her small legs stopped pumping. The happy energy that had surrounded her moments ago evaporated like morning dew under the Texas sun. "Ivy," Callum moved around to face her, concern creasing his brow. "You okay, sweetheart?" Her small face had crumpled, eyes downcast as she dragged her feet in the wood chips to stop the swing completely. Her bottom lip trembled, and Callum felt that instinctive fatherly panic rise in his chest, the one that appeared whenever his daughter showed signs of distress. "Daddy, are you going to leave me too?" Her voice was so small he almost didn't hear it over the distant hum of traffic beyond the park. To Callum's brow furrowed. He knelt down in front of the swing, his knees popping from years of crouching beside engines. The wood chips dug into his jeans as he placed his hands gently on her knees. Her question had come from nowhere, like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. "Leave you? Why would I leave you?" Ivy wouldn't meet his eyes, fidgeting with the hem of her pink dress, the one with the strawberries that she insisted on wearing at least twice a week. "Mommy said we're getting a new daddy." The words hit Callum like a punch to the gut. For a moment, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think. A new daddy? What the hell was Marin telling their daughter? The world around him seemed to dim, the cheerful park fading as his mind struggled to process what he'd just heard. "Ivy," he kept his voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. Years of handling emergencies at the shop had taught him how to stay calm when everything inside him wanted to explode. What exactly did Mommy say about new daddy? She shrugged her tiny shoulders, her eyes still fixed on her light-up sneakers. "She was talking on the phone. She said I might get a new daddy soon." Callum's jaw clenched so tight he could feel his teeth grind together. He'd noticed Marin being distant lately, always on her phone, staying out later than her shifts required. Her excuses about helping close up or inventory had seemed plausible enough for a man who trusted his wife. But this was something else entirely. "And you don't want a new daddy?" he asked, trying to keep the tension from his voice, struggling to make this sound like a normal conversation while his world tilted on its axis. Ivy's lower lip trembled more violently now, and tears welled in her blue eyes. Marin's eyes, he'd always thought. "I don't like him, Daddy. He's mean." Her voice dropped to a whisper, as if sharing a dangerous secret. "He tried to hurt me." Everything went cold. The warm Texas afternoon vanished, replaced by an icy dread that spread through Callum's veins. A dangerous stillness settled over him, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm tears through the plains. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Who tried to hurt you?" "The man who comes over when you're at work." Ivy's words tumbled out faster now. like she'd been holding them back for too long. He's big and loud. He smells funny, like those bottles you don't let me touch. She meant alcohol. One time I spilled my juice, and he grabbed my arm really hard. Tears filled her blue eyes, spilling over onto her cheeks. It hurted, Daddy. He called me a stupid little. She didn't finish, but Callum could fill in the blank. His heart pounded against his ribs, so hard he thought it might crack bone. Someone had put their hands on his daughter. In his house, while he was busting his ass at work. The rage that flooded him was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, white-hot and all-consuming. "Can I see, baby?" he asked gently, his voice a stark contrast to the violent thoughts racing through his mind. The effort it took to keep his tone even made sweat bead on his forehead. Ivy pulled up the sleeve of her dress, revealing her small upper arm. There, marring the soft skin, was a faint bruise, yellowing now, but still clearly visible. 5 fingerprints, clear as day. A large hand had grabbed her, squeezed hard enough to leave marks. Callum studied it, memorizing the size, the shape, the placement. Evidence. His mechanic's eye, trained to notice details, to spot what was wrong, cataloged everything about the injury. "When did this happen, Ivy?" He kept his voice gentle, stroking her hair with a hand that wanted to form a fist. Getting angry now would only scare her, and that was the last thing she needed. "Last week," she said, pulling her sleeve back down as if hiding the evidence could erase what happened. "When you were working on that big truck, the Peterson job." He'd been at the shop until nearly midnight, 3 days straight last week, rebuilding the transmission on a work truck that the owner needed back ASAP. Marin had said she'd switch shifts with a co-worker to be home with Ivy. Another lie. The pieces started to fit together in Callum's mind, creating a picture he couldn't bear to look at but couldn't turn away from either. Marin's late nights, the sudden password on her phone, the way she avoided his touch in bed. And now, this a man in his house, with his daughter, leaving bruises on her perfect skin. Callum stood up, lifting Ivy from the swing and setting her on his hip. She immediately wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face against his shoulder. He could feel her tears dampening his shirt, and it broke something inside him even as it hardened his resolve. "Am I in trouble?" she whispered, her breath warm against his neck. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong," he assured her, stroking her hair, fighting to keep his arms gentle around her when everything in him wanted to hold her tight and never let go. "You did the right thing telling me." As they walked to his pickup truck, Callum's mind raced through possibilities, plans, consequences. The mechanic in him approached the problem methodically. Identify the issue, gather information, fix what's broken. But this wasn't an engine. This was his family, or what was left of it. That he buckled Ivy into her booster seat, checking the straps twice like he always did. His hands moved automatically while his mind churned with questions. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, how dare anyone lay a hand on his daughter? He slid behind the wheel, and his knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel. The urge to drive straight home and wait for this mystery man to show up was almost overwhelming. But that wouldn't solve anything. He needed to be smart about this. Needed to protect Ivy first. "Daddy." Ivy's voice pulled him back from the edge of his rage. He met her eyes in the rearview mirror, those innocent blue eyes that trusted him completely. "You won't let the mean man hurt me again, right?" Callum held her gaze, making a promise he intended to keep with every fiber of his being. "Never again, princess. I promise." As he drove home, the familiar streets of their small town passing by in a blur, plans already forming in his mind, he made a silent vow. Whoever had touched his daughter would pay. And Marin? She'd made the biggest mistake of her life. The truck's engine rumbled beneath them, a sound that had always brought Callum comfort. Today, it felt like a countdown, ticking away the hours until his world would change forever. The modest brick house on Maple Street looked just like it always did as Callum pulled into the driveway. 2-bedroom, 1 bath, with a small yard he kept neatly trimmed each Sunday without fail. The American flag hung by the door, and flower beds lined the walkway, mums just starting to bloom in rich autumn colors. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs, or so he'd thought. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, studying the home he'd worked so hard for. They bought it 5 years ago, just before Ivy was born. The mortgage payments were steep, but Callum had never missed one. He'd installed the ceiling fans himself, painted every room, fixed the leaky roof last spring. All to give his family a safe place to live. What a fucking joke. Can we have spaghetti for dinner? Ivy asked, already unbuckling her seatbelt with practiced fingers. Sure thing, kiddo, Callum replied, forcing a smile he didn't feel. He needed to act normal for her sake. Inside, a storm was brewing, but he wouldn't let her see it. Ivy ran inside ahead of him, her earlier fear seemingly forgotten as she headed straight for her toys in the living room corner. The resilience of children, how quickly they could bounce back. Callum stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the living room with new eyes. The worn brown couch where he collapsed after long shifts. The small TV they'd saved up for last Christmas. The family photos on the wall, Maren with her arm around him, both of them smiling at Ivy's 4th birthday party. Her blonde hair catching the sun, his arm protective around her waist. The happy family. The lie they'd been living. The clock on the wall read 5:10 p.m. Maren wouldn't be home for almost an hour. Plenty of time to start dinner and to look for evidence. Ivy, why don't you watch some cartoons while I make dinner, he suggested, turning on her favorite show. The colorful characters immediately captured her attention, giving Callum the freedom to move through the house unquestioned. He went to their bedroom first, closing the door quietly behind him. The bed was made, Maren's doing. He never bothered when he was the last to leave in the morning. Her perfume lingered in the air, the same vanilla scent she'd worn since they'd met. Once, it had driven him crazy. Now it just turned his stomach. Callum checked Maren's nightstand first, sliding open the drawer. Nothing unusual. Just her reading glasses, some hand cream, a paperback romance novel. Her side of the closet, clothes, shoes, nothing out of place. He ran his hands along the top shelf, behind the stacks of sweaters, seeking anything hidden. Nothing. He checked under the mattress, behind the dresser, in every place he could think someone might hide evidence of an affair. The jewelry box her mother had given her nothing but the earrings he'd bought her for their anniversary and her grandmother's pearls. The shoebox at the back of the closet, just old photos and birthday cards. Frustration mounted as he found nothing concrete. Was he wrong? Was Ivy confused? But those bruises couldn't be explained away. And the new daddy comment? A 5-year-old wouldn't make that up. The bathroom was his next stop. He rifled through the drawers, finding only the usual toiletries. It wasn't until he checked the bathroom trash that he found something. Buried beneath tissues was a receipt from the liquor store 3 days ago when Maren had claimed to be working late. 2 bottles of wine and a pack of cigarettes. Maren didn't smoke. Never had. Callum stared at the receipt, a muscle twitching in his jaw. More evidence. More lies. He pocketed the receipt and continued his search, moving into the kitchen to start dinner as promised. Water for the pasta. Ground beef from the fridge. Onions, garlic, the sauce Ivy liked. His hands moved automatically through the familiar motions while his mind processed what he knew. Someone was coming to his house when he was at work. This person had hurt Ivy. Maren was telling their daughter she might get a new daddy. Maren was lying about her schedule. Maren was buying cigarettes for someone. It wasn't much to go on, but it was enough to know his marriage was a sham. He chopped the onion with more force than necessary, the sharp knife coming down against the cutting board with precise, angry cuts. How long had this been going on? Had she ever loved him? Or was he just a paycheck, a father for her child, a fix-it man for the house? The questions burned in his mind as he stirred the sauce, the rich smell filling the kitchen while bitterness filled his heart. That'd be why the time he heard Maren's car pull into the driveway. Dinner was ready, and Ivy was setting the table with the plastic plates. She loved the ones with different zoo animals on them. Callum had decided not to confront Maren yet. He needed more information and a plan. Rushing in without thinking would only make things worse. The front door opened, and Maren's voice called out, "Something smells good." She walked into the kitchen, wearing the blue uniform from the diner, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. A smudge of what looked like ketchup stained the front pocket. She looked tired, but then she always did after shift points 7 years ago, when they'd met at his friend's barbecue. That smile had made his heart race. She'd been the prettiest girl there, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm when she talked. He'd fallen hard and fast, proposed within 6 months. Now, all he felt was disgust. Just spaghetti, he answered, keeping his voice neutral as he filled Ivy's cup with apple juice. How was work? Busy, she sighed, dropping her purse on the counter. She bent to kiss Ivy's head, then reached for Callum, aiming for his cheek. He turned away, pretending to check the garlic bread in the oven. Dinner's ready. Better eat while it's hot. If Maren noticed his coldness, she didn't comment. She washed her hands at the sink, then sat down at the table, immediately reaching for her phone. No phones at dinner, Ivy said seriously, parroting the rule Callum had established months ago. Right, Dad, right? Callum agreed, his eyes fixed on Maren. Family time is phone-free. Maren hesitated, then put her phone face down beside her plate. Of course, sorry. Throughout dinner, Callum watched her. The way she kept glancing at the silent phone. The way she barely made eye contact with him, focusing instead on her plate or on Ivy. The way she asked Ivy surface-level questions about her day without really listening to the answers. Did you have fun at school today? She asked, twirling spaghetti around her fork without much enthusiasm. We painted pictures of our families, Ivy said through a mouthful of pasta. I made one of you and me and Daddy. That's nice, honey, Maren replied, her eyes darting to her phone as it lit up with a notification. Teacher said we have to bring something special for show and tell on Friday. Ivy continued, oblivious to her mother's distraction. Maren murmured, clearly not listening. Callum felt his anger building again. Even now, she couldn't be bothered to pay attention to their daughter. He took a sip of water, then decided to test the waters. Ivy mentioned something interesting at the park today, he said casually as he twirled pasta onto his fork, watching Maren's face carefully. Maren glanced up, wariness flashing in her eyes for just a moment. Oh, she said something about a man coming over when I'm at work. He kept his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. His eyes never left her face, cataloging every micro-expression. The color drained from Maren's face, but she recovered quickly, reaching for her water glass with a hand that trembled slightly. Oh, that must have been the plumber. We had that leak last week, remember? Callum nodded slowly, pretending to accept this explanation. Right, the leak. There had been no leak, no plumber. Another lie to add to the growing pile. Strange, though, she seemed scared of him. Kids get scared of strangers, Maren shrugged, focusing intently on cutting a meatball in half. It's normal, maybe. Callum took a sip of water, his eyes never leaving her face. But bruises aren't normal, are they? Maren's fork clattered against her plate, and Ivy looked up, startled by the sudden noise. What bruises? Maren asked, her voice unnaturally high. Ivy, go brush your teeth and get your pajamas on, Callum said gently, dropping a kiss on top of her head. I'll be in to read you a story in a minute. But I'm not done, she protested, pointing to her half-full plate. You can finish tomorrow. It's getting late, Callum insisted, his tone brooking no argument. Once Ivy had left the room, grumbling about not being tired, Callum leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. She has bruises on her arm. Finger marks. She says your friend grabbed her when she spilled her juice. Maren's eyes darted to the hallway, then back to Callum. She's making it up. Kids fall all the time. Don't. Callum's voice hardened, the single word carrying the weight of his rage. Don't you dare call our daughter a liar. I'm not saying she's lying, exactly, Maren backpedaled, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear nervously. Just that kids exaggerate. They confuse things. 5 fingerprints aren't a confusion, Callum countered, his knuckles white around his water glass. Maren pushed her plate away, food barely touched. Look, I don't know what she told you, but you're overreacting. There's no mysterious man, no bruises. Then explain this. Callum took out his phone, showing her a photo he'd taken of Ivy's arm while she was watching cartoons. The bruise was clearly visible, unmistakably in the shape of adult fingers. Maren stared at the photo, then looked away, unable to meet his gaze. Like I said, kids fall. 5 fingerprints, Maren. Callum put the phone down with deliberate care, the control in his movements masking the chaos in his mind. That's not from a fall. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the linoleum floor. I don't have to listen to this. I work all day, I come home tired, and now you're accusing me of what exactly? I haven't accused you of anything. Yet, Callum remained seated, his voice deadly calm. The calm before the storm. But I will find out what's going on in my house when I'm not here. Count on it. Marin fled the room, muttering about needing a shower. The bathroom door slammed, and moments later, Callum heard the water running. He cleared the table mechanically, scraping plates into the trash, loading the dishwasher, wiping counters. Normal actions for a life that was crumbling around him. His mind raced as he worked. Her reaction told him everything he needed to know. She was hiding someone, and she was desperate to keep it hidden. The receipt, the bruises, Ivy's comments, Marin's lies had all pointed to one conclusion. An affair. A dangerous one that when the kitchen was cleaned, Callum went to Ivy's room. She sat on her bed in her favorite pajamas, the ones with unicorns, clutching her stuffed rabbit named Hoppy. Her damp hair smelled of the strawberry shampoo she insisted on using, and her cheeks were pink from the warm water. "Ready for your story?" he asked, sitting beside her on the bed that seemed too small for his large frame. She nodded, handing him the book she'd chosen, the one about the Bear family they'd read 100 times before. He read it with all the character voices she loved, maintaining the routine despite the turmoil in his heart. When he finished, he tucked her in with extra care, pulling the covers up to her chin. "Daddy," she whispered as he was about to turn off the lamp. "Can you leave the nightlight on?" "Of course, princess," he said, switching on the star-shaped light that cast a soft blue glow across the room. "No bad dreams tonight, okay?" "Okay, Daddy." She yawned, clutching Hoppy tight. "I love you bigger than the sky. I love you bigger than the whole universe," he replied, their nightly ritual unchanged despite everything. He kissed her forehead, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, letting it calm the storm inside him. When he returned to the living room, Marin was on the couch, scrolling through her phone with a glass of wine in hand. Her hair was wet from the shower, and she'd changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt. She didn't look up when he entered. "We need to talk," he said, sitting in the armchair across from her rather than beside her on the couch. "Not now, Cal. I'm tired." She didn't meet his eyes, her thumb continuing to scroll through whatever she was looking at. "Who is he?" Callum asked directly, done with games, done with lies that Marin's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "What?" "The man who comes here when I'm working." "Who is he?" Callum kept his voice level, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath his words. She laughed, but it sounded forced, brittle. "There's no... You're being paranoid." "Am I?" Callum leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Ivy said you told her she's getting a new daddy. That sounds pretty specific for a 5-year-old to make up." Marin's face flushed with anger, 2 bright spots of color on her cheeks. "You're going to believe the imagination of a child over your own wife? Real nice, California. When my child has bruises and is afraid of a man who comes to our house. Yeah, I'm going to believe her." Callum stood up, too restless to remain seated. "I've got an early shift tomorrow. I'll sleep on the couch tonight." Marin didn't protest. She didn't beg him to stay in their bed. She didn't even look at him as he grabbed a blanket from the hall closet and a pillow from their bedroom. Her lack of reaction was its own kind of confirmation. As he lay on the too small couch, staring at the ceiling fan slowly rotating above him, Callum knew sleep wouldn't come easily. The evidence was mounting, but he needed more. Needed to see for himself exactly what was happening in his house when he wasn't there. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would find out the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. The next day dragged by at the shop. Callum went through the motions, oil changes, brake checks, a timing belt replacement, but his mind was elsewhere. On Ivy, on Marin, on the unknown man who had dared to hurt his daughter. During his lunch break, he made a call to Mike, his boss. "Need to leave early today, Mike." "Family stuff," he said, keeping it vague. "Everything okay?" Mike asked, concern evident in his gruff voice. In the 15 years Callum had worked for him, he'd rarely asked for time off. "I'll figure it out," Callum replied. "Just need to take care of something." "Take what time you need," Mike assured him. "Thompson can finish that Honda you're working on." When afternoon came, Callum cleaned his tools meticulously, wiped the grease from his hands, and changed into the clean shirt he kept in his locker. He needed to set the stage properly to AT home. He made a show of getting ready for an evening shift. Going back in tonight, he told Maren, who sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. Peterson wants his truck done by tomorrow morning. I thought Thompson was helping with that, she said, not looking up. The fact that she knew Thompson's name, knew the details of his work schedule, might once have pleased him. Now it just reminded him how many lies he'd been telling her over dinner each night, sharing the mundane details of his day while she was planning. What, exactly? To replace him? He is, but there's still plenty to do. Callum shrugged, grabbing his keys. Don't wait up. She nodded absently, already back to her phone. Ivy has a play date at Jessica's. I'll pick her up at 7. Good. Ivy would be safe, away from whatever might happen tonight. Instead of heading to the shop, Callum drove around the neighborhood for 20 minutes, giving Maren time to believe he was gone for the night. Then he parked his truck a block over on Elm Street, where he had a clear view of his driveway and front door. The large oak tree provided enough shade to keep him hidden as he settled in to wait, watching as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. A neighbor walked his dog past Callum's truck, nodding a greeting without recognizing him in the fading light. Children played in a yard across the street, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Normal life continuing while Callum's hung in the balance. At 8:15 p.m., Maren's car backed out of the driveway. Off to pick up Ivy, he assumed. He watched her drive away, wondering if she'd bring their daughter home to the man who had hurt her. But at 8:30 p.m., before Maren could possibly have reached Jessica's house, a beat-up blue truck pulled into Callum's driveway. His breath caught in his throat as a man stepped out tall, muscular, with tattoos covering both arms. He wore jeans and a dirty white tank top, a cigarette dangling from his lips, smoke curling into the evening air. Without hesitation, the man walked up to Callum's front door, pulled out a key, and let himself in like he owned the place without a key. The bastard had a key to his house that Callum's hands clenched in a fist so tight his nails bit into his palms. So that's him. The man who had been in his home, in his life, without his knowledge. The man who had put his hands on Ivy. This wasn't just about cheating anymore. This wasn't about his wounded pride or broken marriage. This was about Ivy's safety, about a man who had hurt his child being given free access to their home. The porch light cast long shadows as the door closed behind the intruder. Callum sat motionless in his truck, rage and betrayal washing over him in equal measure. Inside that house, his house, bought with his sweat and sacrifice, was the man who had put bruises on his daughter's arm. The man his wife had chosen over her own family. For a moment, Callum considered storming in right then, confronting this stranger in his home, demanding answers, delivering the justice his fists ached to dispense. But the rational part of his brain, the part that fixed complex engines with patience and precision, held him back. Going in hot would only make things worse. He needed to be smart, needed to think of Ivy first. Callum checked his watch. 8:35 p.m. Maren would be back with Ivy soon. He couldn't let his daughter walk into this situation. Couldn't let her see the man who had hurt her. Couldn't risk putting her in danger again. He pulled out his phone and called Maren's cell. It rang 4 times before she answered, the sound of children's voices in the background. "Cal, what's up?" she asked, sounding genuinely surprised to hear from him. "Hey, change of plans," he said, keeping his voice casual despite the rage boiling inside him. "Can you take Ivy to my mom's for the night? I might finish earlier than I thought, and I'd like to take you out. Just the 2 of us." There was a pause on the other end. "Take me out? Tonight?" "Yeah," he said, watching the windows of his house for any sign of movement. "It's been a while since we had time alone." Another pause. He could almost hear the wheels turning in her head, calculating what this meant for her plans. "I guess I could. Your mom won't mind. You know she loves having Ivy over," Callum said, tension making his voice tight despite his efforts. "Just drop her off and come home. I'll be there by 9:30. "Okay," Maren agreed too quickly. "See you soon." Callum hung up, his mind racing. Ivy would be safe at his mother's. And now he had time to figure out exactly what was going on in his house, who this man was, and what he was going to do about it. that he sat in his truck, watching his home, planning his next move. Now that Ivy was taken care of, he could focus on the betrayal unfolding before him, on the man who had waltzed into his life, hurt his child, and threatened everything he'd worked for. The porch light cast long shadows as the door closed behind Wes. Callum sat motionless in his truck, rage and betrayal washing over him in equal measure. Inside that house's house was the man who had put bruises on his daughter's arm, the man his wife's had chosen over her own family. Callum knew what he had to do now. This ended here. This ended today. Callum's first instinct was to storm into the house, fists clenched and ready. The rage pulsing through his veins demanded action, demanded that he confront the man who'd hurt his daughter. But the rational part of his brain, the part that had kept him alive through 15 years of working with dangerous machinery, held him back. Storming and half-cocked would accomplish nothing. He needed evidence, proof that couldn't be denied or explained away, something concrete that would stand up in court if it came to that. Callum reached into his glove compartment and pulled out his phone. He opened the camera app, switched it to video mode, and zoomed in on his front door. The porch light illuminated the entrance clearly enough to capture what he needed. 8:42 p.m., he murmured, recording the timestamp. Unknown male enter my house at 3487 Maple Street using a key he shouldn't have. He panned to capture the blue truck in his driveway, making sure to get a clear shot of the license plate. TXL 429. Evidence. Then he settled back to wait, camera ready. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. The house remained quiet, just a single lamp visible through the living room window. Callum checked his watch repeatedly, wondering where Marin was, hoping she'd taken Ivy to his mother's as instructed. His phone buzzed with a text. Marin, dropped Ivy off. Be home in 15. Good. At least Ivy was safe. At 9:05 p.m., movement caught his eye. The living room curtain shifted, and Callum could see Wes moving around inside. He was carrying what looked like 2 bottles. Beer, probably. Making himself right at home. That's right, you bastard, Callum muttered, recording every movement. Drink up. Enjoy it while you can. At 9:18 p.m., Marin's car pulled into the driveway. Callum adjusted his position to get a better angle, capturing her as she stepped out. She'd changed clothes since he'd seen her last now, wearing a tight black dress he didn't recognize, her hair down around her shoulders. She put on makeup too, dark lipstick visible even in the dim light. She wasn't dressed for a casual night at home. She was dressed for a date. That Callum's grip tightened on his phone as he recorded Marin walking up to the front door. She paused before entering, checking her reflection in the window, smoothing her hair. Then she went inside. Through the window, Callum could see their reunion. Wes handed Marin a bottle of beer. She laughed at something he said, tossing her hair back in a gesture Callum had once found endearing. Now it made his stomach turn. They settled on the couch, his couch, sitting close, their bodies touching. Wes draped his arm around Marin's shoulders, pulling her against him. She didn't resist. If anything, she leaned into his touch. Jesus Christ, Callum whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper with every second of footage. For the next hour, he recorded them drinking, laughing, touching. Wes would whisper something in Marin's ear, and she'd giggle like a teenager. At one point, he grabbed her roughly, pulling her onto his lap. She wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him deeply to eye in the truck. Callum's jaw clenched so tight it ached. But he kept recording. Every touch, every kiss, every moment of betrayal. At 10:45 p.m., they moved from the couch. Wes grabbed another beer from the kitchen while Marin disappeared down the hallway toward the bedroom. Their bedroom. Callum's and Marin's. A minute later, the light in the bedroom window came on. Wes followed the same path Marin had taken, beer in hand, a swagger in his step. Callum stopped recording then. He didn't need to see more. Didn't want to see more. He had all the evidence he needed. For a long moment, he sat motionless in his truck, staring at the bedroom window. The urge to go in there now, to confront them, was almost overwhelming. But no, that wasn't the smart play. If he went in now, emotions high, who knew what might happen? Instead, he started his truck and drove to a motel on the edge of town. He paid cash for a room, ignored the clerk's curious look at his lack of luggage, and locked himself inside the sparse space. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he reviewed the footage he'd captured. Wes entering with a key, Maren arriving. The two of them drinking, laughing, kissing in his living room. All of it damning. All of it proof of the life she'd been living behind his back. Callum sent the video files to his email as backup, then set an alarm for 6 a.m. He didn't expect to sleep, but exhaustion claimed him eventually, pulling him into a fitful rest filled with images of Wes's hands on his daughter's arm, on his wife's body. Tomorrow, he decided as consciousness slipped away. Tomorrow, this ended. Callum woke before his alarm, the motel room still dark around him. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't remember where he was or why. Then it all came flooding back, the bruises on Ivy's arm, the man in his house, Maren's betrayal. He showered quickly in the lukewarm water, scrubbing away the night's sweat and grime. The face that stared back at him from the bathroom mirror looked older than it had just days ago. Lines of anger and determination etched around his eyes. By 7:30 a.m., he was parked outside his mother's house. The modest one-story home where he'd grown up looked exactly as it always had: flower boxes under the windows, wind chimes on the porch, a welcome mat that had seen better days. His mother answered the door in her bathrobe, coffee mug in hand. "Callum? I didn't expect you so early." "Morning, Mom." He kissed her cheek. "Ivy's still asleep?" "Out like a light." She studied his face, concern creasing her brow. "You look terrible." "What's going on?" "Just some things I need to take care of," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Can Ivy stay with you a little longer?" "Just till this afternoon." His mother's gaze sharpened. The woman who'd raised him alone after his father walked out wasn't easily fooled. "Callum James Mercer. Where are you planning?" "Nothing illegal," he assured her, which wasn't exactly an answer. "I just need to have a conversation with Maren without Ivy around." She sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of his jaw, the same expression she'd seen countless times as he grew up. "Fine, but call me afterward, you hear? Let me know everything's okay." "I will. Promise." He squeezed her shoulder. "Tell Ivy I'll pick her up after lunch." "And Mom?" "Thanks." As he drove toward home, Callum rehearsed what he would say, how he would confront Maren with the evidence, what he would do when not if Wes was still there. He pulled into his driveway at 8:15 a.m. The blue truck was still parked where it had been the night before. Good. He wanted to face them both. The house was quiet as he unlocked the front door. The living room showed evidence of last night's activities: empty beer bottles on the coffee table, Maren's shoes kicked off by the couch, a man's jacket thrown over the armchair. Callum moved silently through the house, his work boots barely making a sound on the carpet. The kitchen was empty, but he could hear movement down the hall. Running water. Someone was in the shower. He sat at the kitchen table and waited, his phone on the table in front of him, the damning video queued up and ready to play. 0.5 minutes later, Maren walked into the kitchen, humming softly. She wore an oversized t-shirt that Callum had never seen before, her hair wet from the shower. She froze when she saw him, her eyes widening in shock. "Cal!" Her hand flew to her throat. "You're home early." Callum said nothing, just watched her, noting the way her gaze darted to the hallway, then back to him. "Calculating. Always calculating." "I thought you'd be at work already," she continued, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. "Do you want some coffee?" "I was just about to make." "Sit down, Maren," Callum interrupted, his voice cold and controlled. Something in his tone made her comply immediately. She sank into the chair across from him, hands twisting nervously in her lap. "Cal, what's going on?" "Where's Ivy?" "Safe." He stared at her, searching for any sign of the woman he'd married, the woman he'd trusted with his life, with his child. "Far away from here." Maren swallowed hard. "You're scaring me." "Good." Callum set his phone on the table and pressed play. "Want to explain this to me?" The video started playing, Wes using a key to enter their home. Maren's arrival. Their embrace in the living room. All color drained from Maren's face as she watched. "Cal, I can explain." "Can you?" He stopped the video, his finger hovering over the screen. "Can you explain why a stranger has a key to my house? Why he's drinking my beer? Why he's kissing my wife?" "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, the lies so blatant it was almost laughable. "It's exactly what it looks like," Callum countered. You're cheating on me. In our home, where our daughter lives. Marin's eyes filled with tears. Cal, I was lonely. You're always working. Shut up. His voice cut through her excuses like a blade. This isn't just about you screwing around. This is about Ivy. He leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Did you know your boyfriend hurt our daughter? Marin's face flickered with guilt, a brief flash, there and gone, but Callum caught it. She knew. She'd known and done nothing. It wasn't that bad. She started. Callum's fist slammed into the wall beside her head, the drywall cracking under the impact. Marin flinched, shrinking back in her chair. Not that bad? He snarled, his control slipping for the first time. He put bruises on her arm, Marin. He scared her so badly she's afraid to sleep without a nightlight. And you let him back into our house? Back near our daughter? Marin shook her head, tears streaming down her face. He didn't mean to hurt her. It was an accident. Bullshit. Callum straightened up, disgust written across his features. You chose him over your own child's safety. What kind of mother does that? You don't understand, Marin pleaded, reaching for his hand. Callum pulled away as if her touch might burn him. I understand perfectly. You. The sound of a door opening down the hall cut him off. Heavy footsteps approached the kitchen, accompanied by a low, masculine grumble. Babe, where'd you put my phone? I need to. Wes stopped short as he entered the kitchen, his eyes landing on Callum. For a tense moment, no one moved. Wes stood in the doorway, wearing nothing but jeans, his chest bare, hair still damp from the shower. A tattoo of a snake wrapped around his right bicep, its fangs bared in a permanent snarl. Then he grinned, a slow, mocking smile that didn't reach his eyes. Well, hell, guess she told you. Callum didn't hesitate. He launched himself across the kitchen, his fist connecting with Wes's jaw in a blow that sent the larger man crashing into the kitchen table. Dishes clattered to the floor, shattering on impact. Cal, stop! Marin screamed, jumping back from the violence. Wes recovered quickly, wiping blood from his split lip. You son of a bitch, he growled, lunging at Callum. They collided in the middle of the kitchen, grappling for control. Wes had height and weight on his side, but Callum had 15 years of physical labor behind him, muscles hardened from lifting engines and wrestling with stubborn machinery. Wes landed a punch to Callum's ribs that knocked the wind from him. Pain flared along his side, but Callum pushed through it, grabbing Wes by the shoulders and slamming him against the refrigerator. Magnets and photos cascaded to the floor, Ivy's drawings, a school schedule, a family photo from happier times. You think it's funny? Callum growled, punctuating each word with a shake that rattled Wes's head against the refrigerator door. Putting your hands on my kid? Get off me, man. Wes tried to push him away, but Callum's grip was iron. Answer me, Callum demanded, slamming him again. You think it's okay to hurt a 5-year-old girl? To grab her hard enough to leave bruises? The brat spilled juice all over my new boots. Wes spat, struggling against Callum's hold. She needed to learn some respect. Something snapped inside Callum at those words. The last thread of restraint, of civilization, gave way to pure, protective rage. His fist connected with Wes's face once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Blood spurted from Wes's nose, splattering across the white refrigerator door. Respect. Callum hissed, his voice deadly quiet. I'll teach you about respect. He dragged Wes away from the refrigerator, throwing him into the center of the kitchen. Wes stumbled, off balance and dazed from the blows. Callum didn't give him time to recover. He followed with a punch to the solar plexus that doubled Wes over, gasping for air. Cal, please. Marin begged from the doorway, her face streaked with tears. You're going to kill him. Shut up, Callum snapped, not taking his eyes off Wes. You lost the right to ask anything of me the moment you let this piece of garbage near our daughter. Wes tried to straighten up, to fight back, but Callum was relentless. Another punch sent Wes staggering backward until his legs hit a chair and he collapsed onto it, blood streaming from his broken nose. That's enough. Wes wheezed, holding up his hands in surrender. I get it, man. I'll stay away from your kid. You'll stay away from my family, Callum corrected him, standing over the bloodied man. My house. My town, if you know what's good for you. Wes glared up at him through swelling eyes. You think this changes anything? She doesn't want you anymore, man. She's been looking for a way out for months. Callum glanced at Marin, who shrank back under his gaze. Is that true? She shook her head frantically. No, Cal, he's lying. I never. Save it. Callum cut her off. I don't care what you want anymore. This is about Ivy now. He turned back to Wes, who was using the hem of his jeans to wipe blood from his face. Get up. Get your stuff. Get out of my house. My truck keys are in the bedroom, Wes muttered, struggling to stand. Marin will get them for you, Callum said, not taking his eyes off the man. Won't you, Marin? She nodded quickly, disappearing down the hallway. Callum and Wes stared at each other in tense silence until she returned, holding a set of keys and a phone. Here, she said, handing them to Wes with trembling fingers. Wes snatched them from her hand. This is bullshit, he muttered, wincing as he touched his broken nose. You're crazy, man. Both of you. Get out, Callum repeated, stepping aside to clear a path to the door. Wes limped toward the exit, favoring his left side where Callum's blows had connected with his ribs. At the door, he paused, looking back at Marin. You coming? Her eyes darted between Wes and Callum, indecision written across her face. Make your choice, Marin, Callum said quietly. But understand this, if you walk out that door with him, you're giving up any claim to Ivy. I will fight you in court until there's nothing left of either of us, and I will win. Tears spilled down Marin's cheeks. Cal, please. Choose, he repeated, unmoved by her tears. After a long, tense moment, Marin shook her head. I can't go with you, Wes. Anger flashed across Wes's battered face. After everything I did for you, you're choosing him. I'm choosing my daughter, Marin whispered, not looking at either man. Wes spat on the floor, a glob of bloody saliva landing on the linoleum. Whatever. You're not worth this shit anyway. He stalked out, slamming the door behind him. Through the kitchen window, Callum watched Wes climb into his truck, his movements stiff and pained. The engine roared to life, and the blue truck peeled out of the driveway, tires squealing on the pavement. When he turned back to Marin, his eyes were cold. Don't think this means we're okay. She nodded, wiping away tears. I know. I couldn't leave Ivy. You already did, Callum said, his voice flat. The moment you let that man near her, you left her. Marin sank into a chair, her shoulders slumped in defeat. What happens now? Callum looked around the kitchen at the broken dishes, the blood on his refrigerator, the shattered remains of the life they'd built together. Now, he said, his eyes narrowing, I'm not done with you yet. Marin trembled at his words, suddenly realizing this was just the beginning. Cal, please, she begged, reaching for him. We can work this out. For Ivy's sake. Don't, he cut her off, stepping away from her touch. Don't you dare use her name. Not after what you did. What are you going to do? She whispered, fear creeping in her voice that Callum's expression was carved from stone. Whatever it takes to protect my daughter. Starting now. When he turned back to Marin, his eyes were cold. Don't think this means we're okay. She nodded, wiping away tears. I know. I couldn't leave Ivy. You already did, Callum said, his voice flat. The moment you let that man near her, you left her. Marin sank into a chair, her shoulders slumped in defeat. What happens now? Callum looked around the kitchen at the broken dishes, the blood on his refrigerator, the shattered remains of the life they'd built together. Now, he said, his voice hard with determination, I'm not done with you yet. Marin's face crumpled as the full weight of his words crashed down on her. She made the biggest mistake of her life, and from the look in Callum's eyes, there would be no forgiveness. No second chances, just consequences. The kitchen still smelled of blood and rage. Broken glass glittered on the linoleum floor like scattered diamonds. Wes lay slumped against the wall, groaning in pain, his face a mess of blood and swelling bruises. Marin stood frozen by the refrigerator, her makeup streaked by tears, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Callum stepped over the broken chair, moving deliberately to the counter where his phone lay. The adrenaline that had fueled his attack on Wes was subsiding, replaced by a cold, calculated anger that focused his mind with crystal clarity. "What are you doing?" Marin asked, her voice rising as she watched him pick up the phone. Callum looked up, his expression hard. "Well, I should have done the moment Ivy showed me those bruises." "Cal, no." Marin moved toward him, panic flashing in her eyes. "You can't. Watch me." He held her gaze as he began to dial. That a smirk crossed Marin's face, an unexpected reaction that caught Callum off guard. "What are you going to say? That you beat up my boyfriend?" The question hung in the air between them, a pathetic attempt at leverage. Callum felt a cold smile form on his lips. "No." His finger hovered over the speakerphone button. "I'm reporting child abuse." The smirk vanished from Marin's face, replaced by something Callum had never seen there before: pure, unadulterated fear. Her face went pale, the blood draining away so rapidly he thought she might faint. "Cal, you can't. They'll take Ivy from you." Callum's finger pressed down, activating the speaker. "That's the idea." The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, Deputy Martinez speaking." "Martinez, it's Callum Mercer. I need to speak with Sheriff Owens." "It's urgent." A pause. "He's here, Callum." "One moment." Marin lunged across the kitchen, her hands reaching for the phone. "Hang up, please." Callum stepped back, keeping the device out of her reach. "Too late, Marin. You made your choice. Now live with it." "Callum." Sheriff Owens' gruff voice came through the speaker. "What's going on, son?" "Sheriff, I need you to come to my house. 3487 Maple Street." Callum kept his eyes fixed on Marin, who had collapsed back against the counter, her head in her hands. "I need to report a child abuse case." "Your daughter?" The sheriff's voice sharpened with concern. "Yes, sir. And I have evidence. Photos, videos, everything you'll need. Stay where you are. I'm on my way." The line went dead. Callum placed the phone on the counter, the silence in the kitchen broken only by Wes's pained breathing. Marin stared at Callum, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "You've ruined everything," she whispered. "No, Marin." Callum shook his head slowly. "You did that all on your own." From the floor, Wes let out a bitter laugh that ended in a cough. "You think you've won? This ain't over, man." Callum turned his cold gaze to the battered man. "For you it is. With your record, you'll be lucky to see daylight in 5 years." "Bullshit," Wes spat, wincing as he tried to straighten up. "It's my word against yours." "No." Callum moved to the kitchen table where the folders of evidence lay neatly organized. "It's your word against Ivy's testimony, the photos of her bruises, and the video of you admitting you grabbed her." Wes's eyes widened. "You're bluffing. There's no video. Want to bet your freedom on that?" Callum asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Marin pushed away from the counter, panic driving her movements. "I need to get out of here. I can't be here when they come." "You're not going anywhere." Callum moved to block the doorway. "You're going to face what you did. Both of you. I hate you." She spat, the words venomous. "Better that than having you love me, apparently." Callum's reply was cold, devoid of emotion. For 10 tense minutes, they remained in a silent standoff, Callum by the doorway, Marin at the counter, Wes slumped against the wall, occasionally spitting blood onto the floor. The distant wail of sirens broke the silence, growing louder until red and blue lights flashed through the kitchen windows. Marin's shoulders slumped in defeat. "This can't be happening." "It is," Callum replied. "Time's up." Sheriff Owens arrived with 2 deputies, their patrol cars parked at angles in Callum's driveway. The sheriff himself was a tall man with silver hair and a weathered face that had seen 40 years of service. He'd known Callum since he was a boy, had watched him grow from a troubled teen into a solid man. "Callum." Owens nodded grimly as he entered the kitchen, his experienced eyes taking in the broken glass, the blood-stained floor, the clear evidence of a struggle. "Quite a mess you've got here." "Not as bad as it looks," Callum replied, stepping aside to let the sheriff into. Owens's eyes landed on Wes, who was still groaning on the floor, blood crusted around his nose and mouth. "I see you two had a disagreement." "You could say that." Callum moved to the counter where he'd placed a folder evidence compiled with methodical precision over the past 2 days. "Sheriff, I need to report a crime. I can see there's been some violence here. Owens noted, gesturing for one of the deputies to check on Wes. Want to tell me what happened? Callum opened the folder, sliding a printed photo across the counter to Owens. It showed Ivy's small arm, the bruises clearly visible. My daughter Ivy told me 2 days ago that a man who comes to our house when I'm at work grabbed her because she spilled juice. She also told me that Marin had said she was getting a new daddy. Owens studied the photo, his expression hardening. Go on. I didn't confront Marin immediately. I wanted proof. Callum pulled out his phone, queuing up the video he'd taken. Last night, I told Marin I had to work late. Instead, I watched the house. He pressed play, showing Owens the footage of Wes entering the house with a key, followed by Marin arriving later. That's Weston Grady, Owens said, recognizing the man immediately. He's on parole. I know. Callum nodded. I did some research. Multiple arrests for assault, violation of a restraining order. And now he's put his hands on my daughter. Marin stood by the refrigerator, arms wrapped around herself. This is ridiculous. You can't just. Be quiet, Mrs. Mercer. Owens commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Marin fell silent, her eyes wild with fear. Callum continued, his voice steady despite the emotion churning beneath. I confronted Marin this morning with the evidence. While we were talking, Grady came out of our bedroom. He hesitated, glancing at his bruised knuckles. There was an altercation. I can see that, Owens commented dryly. Did Grady admit to hurting Ivy? Yes. Callum pulled out another document, a printout of Wes's criminal record. Said she needed to learn some respect because she spilled juice on his boots. Owens' face darkened as he read the rap sheet. And you, Mrs. Mercer? What do you have to say about all this? Marin's mascara had left black trails down her cheeks, her hands twisted together in her lap. It wasn't like that. Wes has a temper, but he didn't mean to hurt Ivy. It was just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Callum's voice was ice. You knew he hurt her, and you let him back into our house. Back near our daughter. I didn't know how bad it was. Marin protested, her voice rising. Ivy never told me he grabbed her that hard. So you admit you knew he put his hands on her? Owens asked, his pen poised over his notepad. Marin's eyes darted between the sheriff and Callum, realizing too late the trap she'd walked into. That's not what I meant. Where's Ivy now? Owens asked, turning back to Callum. Safe with my mother. I took her there last night before confronting Marin. The sheriff nodded, seemingly satisfied with Callum's protective instincts. We'll need to talk to her, get a statement. But we can do that with a child psychologist present. No need to traumatize her further. Thank you, Callum said, relief evident in his voice. Owens turned back to Wes, who was now sitting upright, a deputy crouched beside him. You able to stand, Grady? Go to hell, Wes muttered, spitting blood onto Callum's kitchen floor. I'll take that as a yes. Owens nodded to the deputy, who helped Wes to his feet. Weston Grady, you're under arrest for assault on a minor and trespassing. What? Wes jerked in the deputy's grasp. You can't. I can and I am. Owens recited the Miranda rights while the deputy handcuffed Wes, who continued to protest through his swollen lips. Then Owens turned to Marin, his expression grim. Marin Mercer, you're under arrest for child endangerment. What? Marin's voice rose to a shriek. You can't. I can and I am. Owens signaled to the remaining deputy. You knowingly allowed a violent offender access to your child after he had physically harmed her. That's textbook child endangerment in the state of Texas. The deputy stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Please stand up and place your hands behind your back, ma'am. Callum. Marin turned to him, pleading. Don't do this. Callum watched impassively as the deputy recited Miranda rights and secured the handcuffs around Marin's wrists. Her screams echoed through the house as they led her outside to the waiting patrol car. You're making a mistake. I'm her mother. Callum, don't do this. Callum didn't say a damn word as they took them both away. He stood in the doorway, watching as they helped Marin into the back of one cruiser and Wes, still groaning in pain, into another. Once, the sight might have broken his heart. Now, he felt nothing but a cold certainty that justice was being served. Sheriff Owens remained behind, gathering the evidence Callum had provided. I want you to come down to the station later today, give a formal statement. I'll be there, Callum agreed. After I pick up Ivy from my mother's. Good. Owens clasped his shoulder. And, Callum, you did the right thing. That little girl is lucky to have you. As the patrol cars pulled away, their sirens wailing in the morning air, Callum stood on his front porch watching until they disappeared around the corner. Only then did he allow himself to take a deep breath, the weight of the morning's events settling on his shoulders. IT was over. And yet it was just beginning. The Jefferson County Courthouse stood imposingly at the center of town, its red brick facade and white columns a testament to small-town justice. Callum straightened his tie, a rare accessory he usually reserved for weddings and funerals, as he climbed the worn stone steps beside his lawyer, Michael Burke. Remember, Burke murmured, his briefcase swinging at his side, let me do most of the talking. No matter what Marin or her lawyer says, keep your cool. I know. Callum nodded, his eyes fixed on the heavy wooden doors ahead. Just give me full custody of Ivy. With the evidence we have, I'm confident we will. But be prepared, these hearings can get ugly. Inside, the courtroom was already half full when they entered, mostly strangers there for other cases. But Callum spotted his mother in the front row, her face lined with worry and determination in equal measure. She'd been his rock through all of this, taking Ivy whenever he had to work or meet with lawyers, shielding the little girl from the worst of the upheaval. Marin sat at the opposite table with her court-appointed attorney, a young woman who looked overwhelmed by the case. After 6 weeks in county jail awaiting her hearing, Marin had lost weight, her prison jumpsuit hanging loosely on her frame, dark circles under her eyes. She attempted a smile when she saw Callum, but he looked right through her as he took his seat. All rise for the Honorable Judge Eleanor Hayes, the bailiff announced, and the rustling of movement filled the courtroom. Judge Hayes was a formidable woman in her 60s, her silver hair cut in a no-nonsense bob, her eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. She took her seat, surveyed the courtroom, and nodded. Be seated. The proceedings began with formal introductions. Burke presented their petition for sole custody, outlining the circumstances that had led to this day. Your Honor, he said, his voice confident, the evidence will show that Marin Mercer knowingly endangered her 5-year-old daughter by allowing a violent offender access to their home after he had physically abused the child. Marin's attorney rose. Your Honor, Ms. Mercer acknowledges her lapse in judgment, but maintains that she never intended to put her daughter at risk. She loves Ivy deeply and is committed to rebuilding their relationship in a safe, supervised environment. Judge Hayes nodded, her expression neutral. I'll hear the evidence. What followed was a methodical dismantling of Marin's fitness as a mother. Burke presented the police report, the photos of Ivy's bruises, and a recording Callum had made of Ivy describing what happened. Daddy, the man who comes over grabbed my arm really hard when I spilled juice. Ivy's small voice filled the courtroom from the recorder. It hurted. Marin broke down at the sound, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Her attorney placed a comforting hand on her arm, but the damage was done. The recording continued, with Ivy explaining how Marin had told her she might get a new daddy soon. Burke followed with testimony from Sheriff Owens about Wes's criminal record and the circumstances of the arrests. He called the Child Protective Services worker who had interviewed Ivy, who confirmed the child account and expressed concern about Marin's significant lack of protective capacity. Finally, he called Callum to the stand. After being sworn in, Callum sat straight-backed in the witness chair, his hands resting on his thighs. He answered Burke's questions calmly, describing the day Ivy showed him the bruises, the evidence he'd gathered, and the confrontation that followed. And at any point, Burke asked, did Marin express concern about Weston Grady's treatment of her daughter? No, Callum replied firmly. When I confronted her with the bruises, she tried to claim Ivy had fallen. When I presented the video evidence of Grady entering our home, she begged me not to call the police. Her concern was for him, not for Ivy. Marin's attorney cross-examined him, trying to paint him as controlling and vindictive. Isn't it true, Mr. Mercer, that you assaulted Mr. Grady before calling the police? Yes, Callum admitted without hesitation. When he appeared in my kitchen and made comments about hurting my daughter, I acted to protect her by beating him so severely he required medical attention. Callum met the attorney's gaze steadily. By ensuring he understood he would never touch my daughter again, the attorney tried another angle. And isn't it true that you've been deliberately keeping Ivy from her mother during this legal process? I've followed the court's temporary custody orders to the letter, Callum replied calmly. And yes, I've refused to allow unauthorized visits with a woman who chose her boyfriend over our daughter's safety. When Marin took the stand, her testimony was a tearful blend of excuses and promises. She claimed she hadn't known the extent of Wes's violence, that she'd been manipulated by him, that she made a terrible mistake she would never repeat. I love my daughter more than anything, she pleaded, looking directly at Callum rather than the judge. I made one awful mistake. Please don't take her away from me forever. Burke's cross-examination was surgical in its precision. Ms. Mercer, did you or did you not give Weston Grady a key to the home where your 5-year-old daughter lived? Yes, but... And did you or did you not continue to allow him into that home after you knew he had grabbed your daughter hard enough to leave bruises? I didn't think. It's a yes or no question. Ms. Mercer. Marin's shoulders slumped. Yes. And when Mr. Mercer confronted you with evidence of Mr. Grady's abuse, did you immediately express concern for your daughter's safety? Not exactly, but again, Ms. Mercer, yes or no? A whispered no. No further questions, Your Honor. After closing arguments, Judge Hayes took only 15 minutes to render her decision. She returned to the bench, her expression grave as she addressed the courtroom. In matters of child custody, this court is guided by one principle above all others, the best interest of the child. She looked directly at Marin. Ms. Mercer, while I believe you love your daughter, love alone is not enough. Parents must protect their children from harm, not invited into their homes. Marin began to cry softly, seeming to sense what was coming. The evidence presented today shows a pattern of choices that prioritize your relationship with a violent offender over your daughter's safety and well-being. Judge Hayes shuffled the papers before her. Therefore, I am granting Mr. Mercer's petition for sole legal and physical custody of Ivy Mercer. Ms. Mercer's parental rights are hereby terminated. A gasp escaped Marin's lips, followed by a wail of distress. No, you can't do this. Order, Judge Hayes commanded, banging her gavel. When silence returned, she continued, Ms. Mercer, this court does not make such decisions lightly. However, your actions demonstrated a profound failure to protect your child from known harm. The law is clear in such cases. She turned to Callum. Mr. Mercer, the court recognizes your commitment to your daughter's safety and well-being. You are granted full custody with all legal rights and responsibilities that entails. Thank you, Your Honor, Callum said, relief washing over him as the judge rose and left the courtroom. Marin collapsed against her attorney, sobbing openly now. Please, there has to be something we can do. An appeal. Her attorney shook her head, already gathering her papers. I'm sorry, Ms. Mercer. With the evidence presented, an appeal would likely fail. Callum felt no satisfaction in Marin's pain, only a weary resolution that he'd done what was necessary to protect his daughter. He stood to embrace his mother, who had tears in her eyes. It's over, Mom, he said quietly. She's safe. You did good, son, she whispered, patting his cheek as she had when he was at BOY as they prepared to leave. Marin broke away from her attorney, rushing toward them. Callum, please. You can't do this. She needs her mother. The bailiff moved to intercept her, but Callum held up a hand. It's okay. He faced Marin directly for the first time since the hearing began. You should have thought of that before you let him hurt her. I'll change, Marin promised desperately. I'll do whatever it takes. Please don't keep her from me. I'm not keeping her from you, Callum replied, his voice steady. The court did that, and you did it to yourself. He turned away. Let's go, Mom. As they walked out of the courthouse into the bright Texas sunshine, Callum felt a weight lift from his shoulders. There would be challenges ahead explaining to Ivy why her mother couldn't see her anymore, building a new life for just the two of them, navigating the complicated waters of single fatherhood. But Ivy was safe, and that made everything else manageable. Months later, Callum and Ivy were settled in their new home. Far from their old neighborhood, far from the memories that haunted them, they had started fresh. A small house with a yard where Ivy could play, a new school where no one knew their story, a chance to rebuild without the shadows of the past. Ivy was happy, free of fear, and surrounded by love. The nightmares that had plagued her in the weeks following the arrests had faded. She rarely asked about Marin anymore, and when she did, Callum answered honestly, but simply. Mommy made bad choices, and now she can't be with us anymore. Marin had spent 6 months in jail for child endangerment. Upon release, she'd found herself in a world that had moved on without her. The diner had fired her. No one else in town would hire her once they learned why she'd been arrested. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. Neighbors who had once smiled and waved now closed their doors when they saw her coming. Homeless, broke, and completely alone, she tried reaching out to Callum, begging for another chance, for just a glimpse of Ivy. Her calls went straight to voicemail. Her letters were returned unopened. Her attempts to see them at the grocery store or park were met with Callum's back as he guided Ivy away. Every door had slammed in her face, and the one that mattered most, the door to her daughter's life, remained firmly shut. Wes? He had received 5 years for child assault and breaking parole. Behind bars, unable to hurt Ivy or anyone else's child, he had already faded from their lives like a bad dream upon waking. Tonight, as the Texas sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Callum sat on the porch swing, watching Ivy play in the yard. Her laughter carried on the evening breeze, a sound that never failed to heal something broken inside him. "Daddy, look," she called, pointing to a butterfly that had landed on a rose bush he'd planted when they first moved in. "It's so pretty." "Sure is, Princess," he called back, smiling as she crept closer to the insect, her movements exaggeratedly slow and careful. Ivy giggled as the butterfly took flight, then ran back to the porch, climbing onto the swing beside him. The old wooden frame creaked gently as they set in motion, back and forth in a soothing rhythm. "Daddy." Ivy's voice was thoughtful as she leaned against his arm. "Yes, Princess. Remember when you promised you wouldn't leave me? At the park that day?" Callum's heart squeezed at the memory of the day that had changed everything, set them on this path. "I remember." Ivy giggled, hugging his arm. "You were right, Daddy. You never left me." Callum bent down, pressing a kiss to her forehead, breathing in the scent of sunshine and strawberry shampoo. "Never will, sweetheart." As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in deepening shades of purple and gold, Callum held his daughter close, grateful for the second chance they'd been given. The cost of betrayal had been high. A marriage destroyed, a family fractured, lives forever altered. But sitting here with Ivy, safe and happy beside him, Callum knew it had been worth every painful moment. Some prices had to be paid to protect what mattered most. And nothing in this world mattered more than the little girl beside him, watching the sunset with trust in her eyes and love in her heart. The antique clock in the hallway chimed 6 times, its sonorous tones echoing through the emptiness of the Wright residence. Sophia stood before her bedroom mirror, methodically applying mascara while studying her reflection. At 34, she still turned heads. Her blonde hair fell in carefully styled waves. Her green eyes sparkled with a vitality that belied her inner restlessness, and her fitted black dress spoke of both success and careful cultivation of image. She hadn't heard Sebastian leave for work that morning. These days, their schedules rarely aligned, a circumstance she'd orchestrated with deliberate precision. Her husband's absence had become a comfort rather than a void, like finally being able to breathe after wearing a corset for too long. The buzz of her phone interrupted her morning routine. Lucas's name appeared on the screen, sending a familiar thrill through her body. Their digital exchanges had become a dance of desire and secrecy, each message a step closer to their next encounter. "Missing you," his text read. "Dinner tonight?" Sophia's lips curved into a smile as she typed back, "Sebastian has a late meeting with clients. I'll be there at 7. She paused, finger hovering over the screen, then added, Wear that blue shirt I like." His response came instantly. "Anything for you, beautiful." The exchange left her feeling light, almost giddy. Lucas had that effect on her, making her feel young, desirable, alive in ways that her marriage hadn't in years. She returned to her makeup routine, this time paying extra attention to the subtle details that Lucas always noticed downstairs. She moved through their kitchen with practiced efficiency, brewing coffee she wouldn't drink, leaving dirty dishes in the sink to maintain the illusion of a normal morning routine. Sebastian's coffee mug sat unused in the dish rack, a silent reminder of their growing distance. When had they last shared breakfast? She couldn't remember, and the realization brought neither guilt nor regret. Her phone chimed again, but this time it was Sebastian. "Hope you have a good day." "Love you." Sophia stared at the message, at its painful predictability. Even his texts were boring. The same phrases, the same sentiments, as reliable and uninspiring as retirement plans or weather forecasts. She left it unanswered, slipping the phone into her purse as she headed for the garage. The day at her real estate office crawled by with excruciating slowness. Each client meeting felt like an exercise in patience, each phone call an obstacle between her and evening. By 5 o'clock, she was practically vibrating with anticipation. "Heading out, Mrs. Wright?" Her assistant, Claire, asked as Sophia gathered her things. "Yes, I have a dinner meeting." The lie came easily practiced. "Could you make sure those Thompson contract revisions are on my desk first thing tomorrow?" "Already done." Claire smiled, efficient as always. "Have a good evening." The drive to Lucas's apartment complex took exactly 23 minutes in evening traffic. Sophia had timed it repeatedly, knowing precisely how to pace her arrival to avoid any nosy neighbors who might recognize her car. The familiar flutter of excitement built in her stomach as she pulled into the underground parking garage. Choosing her usual spot behind a concrete pillar, Lucas answered his door, wearing the requested blue shirt, its fabric stretching appealingly across his broad shoulders. His dark hair was slightly damp from a recent shower, and his cologne, something expensive and masculine, filled her senses as he pulled her inside. "You're early," he murmured against her neck, hands already working at the zipper of her dress. "Couldn't wait," she breathed, fingers tangling in his hair as his lips found that sensitive spot below her ear. "Missed you." Their passion had an edge of desperation to it, as if each encounter might be their last. Clothes marked a trail from his entryway to the bedroom, breadcrumbs of their desire scattered across his polished hardwood floors. Lucas's touch was demanding, possessive, everything Sebastian's wasn't. Where her husband's careful lovemaking had become a tepid routine, Lucas set her skin on fire with each caress later. Wrapped in his Egyptian cotton sheets, Sophia traced patterns on Lucas's chest while he played with her hair. These quiet moments after their passion had begun to mean as much to her as the physical intimacy. "You should leave him," Lucas said suddenly, his voice rumbling beneath her ear. Sophia's hand stilled. "Lucas, I'm serious." He shifted to look at her, his hazel eyes intense. "This sneaking around, these stolen moments, don't you want more? Don't you deserve more?" "It's not that simple." She sat up, drawing the sheet around herself like armor. "There's the house, our investments, 15 years of shared life, all of which can be divided by lawyers." Lucas followed her up, his frustration evident in the set of his jaw. "You don't love him, Sophie. You haven't for years, if you ever did. You don't know that, don't I?" His laugh held no humor. "You're here in my bed, wearing lingerie you bought for me to take off. Everything about your marriage is a facade, and we both know it." Before she could respond, her phone chirped. Sebastian's name on the screen sent an unexpected chill down her spine. "Coming home early. Thought we could have dinner together. Your choice of restaurant?" "Fuck," Sophia muttered, already sliding out of bed. "He's coming home early." Lucas watched her with a mixture of amusement and irritation as she gathered her scattered clothes. The dutiful wife returns to her cage. "Don't start." She shot him a warning look while shimming into her dress. "Not everyone can live as freely as you do. That's because not everyone is brave enough to claim what they want." He stood, unashamedly naked, and helped with her zipper. "One day, Sophie, you'll have to choose between the life you pretend to want and the one you actually do." His words followed her down the elevator and into her car, echoing uncomfortably in her mind. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and racing thoughts. She hadn't expected Sebastian home early. He never came home early. 15 years of marriage had taught her his patterns, made him predictable. This deviation sent warning signals through her mind. Relief flooded through her when she pulled into their driveway and found it empty. Another text from Sebastian waited on her phone, stuck in traffic. Home in 30. The house was dark and quiet when she entered, exactly as she'd left it that morning. Sophia moved through the rooms quickly, turning on lights, creating the illusion of having been home for hours. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floors as she climbed the stairs. Headed for a quick shower to wash away the evidence of her afternoon, she was reaching for the bedroom light switch when a sound stopped her. The soft creak of leather from Sebastian's reading chair by the window. Her hand froze midair as her eyes adjusted to the darkness. Sebastian sat perfectly still, his figure a darker shadow among shadows. He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched her with an intensity she'd never felt from him before. "Sebastian?" Her voice sounded strange, too high, too breathless. "You scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark?" When he didn't respond immediately, she reached again for the light switch. His voice stopped her. "Don't." One word, spoken softly, but it froze her in place. Something in his tone, something she'd never heard before, raised goosebumps along her arms. "Sebastian, what's going on? I thought you were stuck in traffic." "Did you?" Now he moved, reaching slowly for the lamp beside his chair. Light bloomed in the room, revealing his face calm, composed, utterly devoid of its usual warmth. His eyes moved from her face to her neck, where she suddenly remembered Lucas had left his mark. "How long?" The question came out measured, controlled, like a doctor inquiring about symptoms. That Sophia's mind raced through possible responses, possible explanations, possible lies. But something in Sebastian's expression told her the time for lies had passed. "How long?" Each word carried the weight of steel, the precision of a surgeon's blade. "Sebastian, I can explain. I saw you." His interruption was quiet, but sharp enough to cut glass. "Today. With him. In his bed." His eyes never left her face. "So I'll ask one more time. How long have you been sleeping with Lucas?" The world tilted beneath her feet. Sebastian had seen them, had followed her, had watched as she betrayed their marriage vows in the most intimate way possible. 6 months, she whispered, the truth falling from her lips before she could stop it. Sebastian nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already known. He stood, smoothing his slacks with careful hands that she noticed didn't shake at all. Without looking at her again, he walked to the door. "Where are you going?" Panic edged into her voice. This wasn't how she'd expected him to react. Where was the anger, the hurt, the desperate pleading she'd anticipated? He paused in the doorway, his back straight and rigid. "I need some air." His voice remained eerily calm, devoid of any emotion she could grasp onto. "Sebastian, wait. We should talk about this." "I never meant to." He turned then, and something in his eyes made her step back. For just a moment, something dark and foreign flickered across his features, something that didn't belong on her mild-mannered husband's face. Then it was gone, replaced by that unsettling calm. "There's nothing to talk about, Sophie." He used her nickname like a weapon, precise and cutting. "You've made your choice. Now we both have to live with it." The front door opened and closed with a decisive click, leaving Sophia alone with the echoes of his words. She sank onto their bed, her legs unable to hold her any longer. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Sebastian was supposed to fight, to cry, to beg her to stay. His quiet acceptance felt wrong, dangerous. Somehow, the days that followed settled into an unsettling routine. Sebastian moved into the guest room without discussion, his clothes and personal items disappearing from their shared spaces like he was slowly erasing himself from her life. They existed in the same house, but in different orbits. Careful never to intersect, when they did occasionally cross paths, Sebastian maintained that same eerie calm. He spoke only when necessary, his words polite but empty of warmth. He came and went like a ghost, his presence in their home barely registering except for the subtle signs of his passage. a coffee cup in the sink, the sound of the shower running at odd hours, the whisper of footsteps in the hallway late at night. Sophia told herself this was better than fighting. Told herself his passive acceptance proved what she'd always known, that he was too weak to stand up for himself, too spineless to demand what he deserved. The guilt that had initially plagued her faded like morning mist, burned away by Lucas's passionate embraces and Sebastian's apparent indifference. Life continued. She worked, met Lucas whenever possible, and ignored the growing distance between her and Sebastian. If sometimes she caught him watching her with that same strange, empty expression he'd worn the night he discovered her affair, she pushed the discomfort aside. If occasionally she woke in the night to find him standing in the hallway, staring at nothing, she told herself it was just his way of coping. Then came the morning that changed everything. The knock on her office door was sharp, authoritative. Two men entered without waiting for her response. One tall and broad-shouldered with graying temples, the other younger with watchful eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Wright," the older man spoke first. "I'm Detective Christian Walker, and this is Officer Julian Morris. We need to ask you a few questions." Something in their expressions sent ice through her veins. "What is this about?" Detective Walker pulled out a small notebook. "When was the last time you saw Lucas Matthews?" The question hit her like a physical blow. "What?" "Lucas Matthews," Officer Morris repeated, his tone carefully neutral. "We understand you know him." "Ah, yes." Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she folded them on her desk. "We're friends. I saw him 3 days ago." "Why?" The detectives exchanged glances that made her stomach clench. "Mr. Matthews' body was discovered this morning," Detective Walker said, watching her reaction closely. "In a cabin outside the city." The world narrowed to a pinpoint of light. "Body." The word felt foreign on her tongue. "He was murdered, Mrs. Wright." Walker's eyes never left her face. "Rather brutally, I'm afraid. The cabin where he was found is registered to your husband's family." Sophia's mind spun like a broken compass. Sebastian's family cabin, where they used to spend summers in the early years of their marriage. Where Sebastian still went sometimes to think. "That's impossible," she whispered, but even as she said it, memories began to surface. Sebastian's unnatural calm after discovering her affair, his late-night absences, the strange light in his eyes when he watched her. "We'll need you to come with us," Officer Morris said, "to identify the body and answer some questions." The drive to the cabin passed in a blur of pine trees and mounting dread. Sophia's thoughts raced between denial and dawning horror. Lucas couldn't be dead. And even if he was, Sebastian couldn't. He wouldn't. But as she stood in the cabin's bedroom, staring at the blood-stained sheets and the evidence markers scattered like yellow confetti, reality crashed over her in waves. The police spoke around her, describing what they'd found, but their words washed past her unheard. All she could see was the violence painted across the room. Violence that spoke of rage, of hatred, of a darkness she'd never suspected lurked beneath Sebastian's quiet exterior. "Mrs. Wright?" Detective Walker's voice cut through her thoughts. "Are you sure you want to see the body?" She nodded numbly. They led her to another room where a sheet-covered form lay on the floor. With clinical precision, they pulled back the sheet. Sophia's knees buckled. Lucas's face was almost unrecognizable, twisted in a final expression of terror and agony. The rest of him, she turned away, retching. "Take your time," Officer Morris said, his tone gentler now. "We know this is difficult." When she could speak again, Sophia forced herself to look at the detective. "You think my husband did this?" "We're exploring all possibilities," Walker replied carefully. "But we need to know where you were 3 nights ago." The question struck her like a slap. "You think Your fingerprints are all over the cabin, Mrs. Wright, including on items in this room." Walker pulled out his phone. "We also have text messages between you and the victim. Quite explicit ones. And a witness placed your car near here the night of the murder." Sophia's world tilted again. Text messages? Her car? That was impossible. She hadn't been anywhere near the cabin when understanding dawned like ice water in her veins. Sebastian, who had access to her phone while she slept. Sebastian, who knew her passcodes, who could have sent messages in her name. Sebastian, who had seemed so calm, so accepting of her betrayal, she looked back at Lucas's body, at the savage violence that had ended his life, and remembered the strange light she'd seen in her husband's eyes the night he discovered their affair. Not weakness, not acceptance planning. "Mrs. Wright," Officer Morris said, "I'm afraid you'll need to come with us to the station." As they led her to the police car, Sophia caught a glimpse of Sebastian standing in the driveway. He was talking to another officer, his expression concerned, helpful, perfectly normal. But when his eyes met hers for just a moment, she saw it again, that flash of something dark and satisfied. Then he turned away, and Sophia understood with perfect clarity that her quiet, unassuming husband had orchestrated her nightmare with meticulous precision. He hadn't forgiven her betrayal, that he'd just been planning his revenge. The interrogation room surrounds Sophia with its harsh fluorescent lights and bare concrete walls, creating a stark contrast to the life of privilege she left behind. The metal chair beneath her feels cold through her wrinkled designer dress, the same one she wore when they brought her in 2 days ago. Detective Walker spreads crime scene photos across the table with deliberate slowness, each image a fragment of the nightmare her life has become. The photos show different angles of the cabin's interior. Blood-spattered walls, overturned furniture, signs of a violent struggle that ended in Lucas's death. "Walk us through this again, Mrs. Wright," Walker says, his tone carrying that specific blend of authority and faux sympathy she's come to recognize. "Start with how you met Mr. Matthews." Detective Walker repeats, his weathered face illuminated harshly by the fluorescent lights. Sophia draws a shaky breath, her manicured nails digging into her palms. "We met at a real estate conference in March. His firm was handling commercial properties in the area." "And when did your relationship become intimate?" Officer Morris asks from his position by the door, his pen poised over a notepad. "I don't see how that's relevant to." "Everything's relevant, Mrs. Wright," Walker interrupts, sliding another photo forward. This one shows Lucas's body, twisted and broken on the cabin floor. "A man is dead. A man you were intimately involved with. So I'll ask again, when did your relationship cross that line?" Sophia stares at the photo, her stomach churning. "May. It started in May. And your husband knew about the affair?" "He found out a month ago." The memory of Sebastian's face that night sends a chill down her spine. "He came home early, caught us together." "How did he react?" Morris's pen scratches against paper. "He didn't." Sophia frowns, remembering. "He just walked away. Didn't say a word." Walker exchanges a glance with Morris. "That must have seemed strange. Most men would have reacted differently." "Sebastian isn't most men." The words come out before she can stop them, carrying more truth than she'd realized. "Tell us about the cabin, Mrs. Wright." Walker spreads out more photos, exterior shots of the rustic building nestled among pine trees. "When was the last time you were there?" "I haven't been to the cabin in months." "Not since." She stops, realizing her mistake too late. "Not since when?" "Not since last summer." "With Sebastian?" Walker's smile doesn't reach his eyes. "That's interesting. Because we have witnesses who place your car on Lakeside Road, the only access to the cabin, 3 nights ago. The night Lucas Matthews was murdered." "That's impossible. I was home that night." "Can anyone verify that?" Sophia opens her mouth, then closes it. Sebastian had been at his charity event. She'd been alone, or at least she thought she had been. "Your fingerprints are all over the cabin, Mrs. Wright, including on the murder weapon." Walker produces another photo, a heavy brass fireplace poker, its end darkened with dried blood. "Care to explain that?" "I used it before when we'd visit the cabin. For the fireplace. But I didn't." "We also found traces of blood in your car trunk," Morris interjects. "The lab confirms it matches Mr. Matthews." The room spins slightly. "I want my lawyer." "That's your right." Walker gathers the photos unhurriedly. "But consider this. Right now, every piece of evidence points to you. Every single one. Maybe it's time to tell us what really happened that night." The holding cell they place her in measures exactly 8 steps by 6. Sophia counts them repeatedly during her first night, trying to focus on anything except the images of Lucas's broken body. The thin mattress crackles with every movement, stuffed with material that feels like dried corn husks. A steel toilet sits behind a half-wall that offers more suggestion than reality of privacy. Sleep comes in fitful bursts, broken by nightmares of blood and betrayal. In each dream, Sebastian watches from the shadows, his face carrying that same eerie calm she'd seen the night he discovered her affair. Morning brings her court-appointed attorney. Marcus Harrison looks fresh from law school, his eager expression at odds with the gravity of her situation. He spreads files across the visitation room table, organizing them with nervous energy. They have a strong circumstantial case. He begins adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. The forensics team found significant evidence linking you to the crime scene. I didn't kill him. Sophia leans forward, her voice urgent. Someone is setting me up. Someone. Harrison's pen taps against the table. You mean your husband? He's not what people think. The way he reacted when he found out about Lucas, it wasn't normal. According to witness statements, Mr. Wright appeared devastated but controlled. Several colleagues mentioned he threw himself into work, attended counseling. It was an act. Sophia runs her hands through her tangled hair. Everything about Sebastian is calculated. Always has been. Harrison studies her with a mix of sympathy and skepticism. Mrs. Wright, Sophia, I need you to understand something. Your husband has an alibi that's practically bulletproof. The Anderson Foundation Charity Gala had over 200 guests, including the mayor and half the city council. There are photos, videos, sworn statements from dozens of people who interacted with him throughout the night. Of course there are. Sophia laughs, a sound edged with hysteria. Sebastian never leaves anything to chance. Never. Memories surface unbidden, moments she dismissed over the years that now take on darker significance. Sebastian documenting everything in his little notebooks, recording conversations word for word. His habit of studying people, noting their patterns and routines. The way he could recall exact details from events years past. Tell me about your marriage, Harrison prompts, pulling out a fresh legal pad. Sophia stares at her hands, at the wedding ring she still wears. We met in college. He was different, quiet but intense. He noticed everything, remembered everything. I used to joke that he had a computer for a brain. And when did things change? They didn't, not really. I changed. She swallows hard. I got bored. Sebastian was so predictable. Always the same routines, the same careful planning. Until the night he caught me with Lucas. He just stood there, watching us. Then walked away without a word. She meets Harrison's eyes. Who does that? Who catches their wife in bed with another man and just walks away? Someone in shock, perhaps? No. Sophia shakes her head. You don't understand. Sebastian doesn't do anything without purpose. That calm, it wasn't shock. It was something else. Harrison makes a note, his expression thoughtful. The prosecution will argue that your affair gave you motive. That when Lucas threatened to end things, you snapped. Lucas never threatened anything. He wanted me to leave Sebastian, to start over with him. Can anyone verify these conversations? Sophia stops, realizing their conversations had always been private, their meetings carefully scheduled to avoid witnesses. Even their text messages, which she now suspects Sebastian had somehow altered, wouldn't show Lucas's desire for a deeper commitment. Days blur together in a haze of legal meetings and sleepless nights. Each piece of evidence Harrison uncovers seems designed to tighten the noose around her neck. The prosecution builds their case methodically, each detail falling into place with a precision that feels hauntingly familiar. Sebastian visits on a Tuesday, exactly 2 weeks after her arrest. He enters the visitation room, wearing one of his expensive suits, looking every bit the successful businessman and grieving husband. Sophie. He speaks her nickname softly, his face a perfect mask of concern. How are you holding up? Don't. She wraps her arms around herself, creating a barrier between them. Don't pretend you care. I'm still your husband. He sits across from her, his movements measured and precise. Despite everything. Despite what, Sebastian? Despite finding out about Lucas? Or despite framing me for his murder? Something flickers in his eyes. That same darkness she'd glimpsed the night he discovered her affair. But his voice remains gentle. concerned. You're under tremendous stress. The evidence, the investigation. It's natural to look for someone to blame. The evidence? Sophia leans forward, studying his face. Like the blood in my car? The text messages I never sent? The witnesses who conveniently saw my car at the cabin? Sophie, you planned this, didn't you? All of it. You probably started the night you caught us together. Sebastian's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in his posture, a subtle straightening of his spine, a slight tilting of his head. For a moment, he reminds her of a predator assessing its prey. That's quite an accusation. His voice carries a new note, something cold and satisfied, especially from someone in your position. Why? The question bursts from her. If you wanted revenge, why not just divorce me? Divorce? Now Sebastian smiles, the expression never reaching his eyes. That would have been too easy, wouldn't it? You'd have walked away with half of everything we built together, free to continue your life with your lover. A guard appears at the door. Time's up. Sebastian stands, smoothing his jacket with familiar precision. Try to stay positive, Sophie. These things have a way of working themselves out. The preliminary hearing arrives with brutal swiftness. Sophia sits beside Harrison in the courtroom, wearing clothes Sebastian sent from home, another subtle reminder of his control. The prosecution presents their evidence methodically, building their case piece by careful piece. The state will prove, the prosecutor announces, that Mrs. Wright engaged in a months-long affair with the victim, Lucas Matthews. That when Mr. Matthews threatened to end the relationship, she lured him to her husband's family cabin and murdered him in a crime of passion. Sebastian testifies as a character witness, his performance flawless. He describes their marriage, his discovery of her affair, his attempts to reconcile. His voice breaks at just the right moments, his pain seemingly genuine. I blamed myself, he tells the court, eyes downcast. If I'd been a better husband, maybe she wouldn't have strayed. I was willing to forgive her, to work things out. I never imagined she would. He leaves the sentence unfinished, letting the implication hang in the air. Sophia watches from the defendant's table, seeing for the first time how masterfully he has crafted his image, the devoted husband. Wounded but loyal, standing by his wife despite her betrayal, the evidence mounts as weeks pass. Each new revelation seems designed to destroy any chance of reasonable doubt. Her fingerprints on the murder weapon, blood traces in her car, witnesses who place her near the cabin on the night of the murder. Harrison works tirelessly, but each attempt to build her defense meets a wall of carefully constructed evidence. Even her past works against her credit card receipts, showing purchases of lingerie never worn for Sebastian, hotel meetings with Lucas, the gradual withdrawal of money from their joint accounts. They're building a narrative, Harrison explains during one of their meetings. A woman trapped in a loveless marriage, having an affair with a younger man. When he threatened to end things, she snapped. But that's not what happened. The evidence suggests otherwise. Your fingerprints, your car, your phone records. Sebastian set this up. He's patient, methodical. He would have planned every detail. Harrison sighs, rubbing his temples. Your husband was at a charity event with hundreds of witnesses. He has photos, videos, timestamped social media posts. There's no way he could have. That's exactly what he wanted everyone to think. Sophia's laugh holds an edge of desperation. Don't you see? The perfect alibi, the overwhelming evidence against me. It's all too neat, too precise. The trial itself becomes a blur of testimony and evidence. The prosecution builds their case methodically, presenting a picture of a calculating woman who murdered her lover in a crime of passion. Sebastian's testimony provides the final stroke, his performance so convincing that even Sophia almost believes him. When the jury returns with their verdict, the courtroom falls silent. Sophia stands on shaking legs, Harrison's supportive hand on her arm. On the charge of first-degree murder, the jury foreman reads, "We find the defendant guilty." The words echo through the courtroom like physical blows. As the judge reads her sentence, life in prison, Sophia catches Sebastian's eye across the room. For just a moment, his mask slips, and she sees the truth behind his calm exterior. Not weakness, not acceptance, triumph. She understands now, too late, how completely he had orchestrated her destruction. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every subtle detail had been carefully arranged to ensure her conviction. The quiet man she dismissed as weak and uninteresting had planned and executed the perfect revenge. Yes, they lead her away. Sophia realizes that Sebastian's true nature had been there all along, hidden behind his mild-mannered facade. She had mistaken his patience for passivity, his attention to detail for obsession, his careful planning for weakness. How wrong she had been. The harsh fluorescent lights of the women's correctional facility cast sickly shadows across the concrete walls. Sophia lay on her narrow bunk, counting the spiderweb of cracks in the ceiling, a habit she developed in the 3 weeks since her sentencing. The orange jumpsuit felt like sandpaper against her skin, a constant reminder of her new reality outside her cell. The daily rhythm of prison life played out in metallic clangs and echoing footsteps. A guard's keys jingled, followed by the heavy thud of cell doors opening and closing. Somewhere down the block, a woman sobbed quietly. "Right!" The guard's sharp voice startled her from her thoughts. Officer Martinez stood at her cell door, her expression unreadable. "You've got a visitor?" Sophia frowned. Her court-appointed attorney, Harrison, wasn't due until next week, and her family had stopped visiting after the conviction. Their absence spoke volumes about Sebastian's influence, how carefully he'd shaped public opinion against her. "Who is it?" Martinez shrugged. "Your husband." The word hit like a physical blow. Sophia's hands began to tremble as she stood, smoothing the coarse fabric of her jumpsuit in a futile attempt at dignity. The walk to the visitation room felt like a march to execution. Each step echoed off the institutional walls, mixing with the pounding of her heart. Other inmates watched her pass, their eyes holding a mixture of curiosity and judgment. "The notorious husband killer," they whispered. "The cheating wife who murdered her lover." But if they only knew the truth. Sebastian waited in the visitation room, a study in calculated perfection. His charcoal suit looked freshly pressed, his posture relaxed yet commanding as he sat at the metal table. The fluorescent lights caught the silver threading through his dark hair, a distinguished touch that Sophia had once found attractive. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting, his eyes taking in her prison-issued attire. "Orange really isn't your color." Sophia sank into the chair across from him, conscious of the security cameras tracking their every move. "What do you want, Sebastian?" Direct as always. He placed a manila envelope on the table between them. "I brought you something. Consider it an early Christmas present." The envelope felt heavy in her hands. Inside, she found divorce papers, the legal language stark and unforgiving. Her fingers traced over Sebastian's signature, already in place at the bottom. "Irreconcilable differences," she read aloud, her voice bitter. "Is that what we're calling premeditated murder these days?" Sebastian's lips curved into a smile that never reached his eyes. "Now, Sophie, we both know how dangerous false accusations can be. Just look where they've landed you. Why now?" She gestured at the papers. "Why not wait until my appeals?" "Appeals?" He laughed softly. "Do you really think you'll win an appeal? The evidence against you is overwhelming. Every judge who reviews your case will find the same thing: proof of your guilt written in fingerprints, DNA, and witness statements. Evidence you planted, allegedly." Sebastian leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? No one would ever believe that quiet, methodical Sebastian Wright could orchestrate something like this. The grieving husband, standing by his unfaithful wife even after she murdered her lover? It's the perfect cover story." "You're enjoying this," Sophia realized, studying his face. "You've been enjoying it since the beginning." "Of course I have." His expression hardened. "Do you know what it was like watching you throw away 15 years of marriage? Seeing you sneak around with Lucas, thinking I was too stupid to notice? So you killed him. I executed him." Sebastian's correction came sharp and precise. "There's a difference, and I made sure he understood why before the end." Sophia's stomach churned. "What do you mean?" "I wanted him to know that his death would destroy you. That everything, the evidence, the witnesses, the perfectly crafted trail leading to your conviction was designed to make you suffer." His eyes glittered with a cold satisfaction. "He begged, promised to leave town, to never see you again. But it was never about him. Tell me, Sophia demanded, her voice raw. Tell me exactly what you did. You owe me that much. Sebastian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Why not? It's not like anyone would believe you anyway. He settled back in his chair, as comfortable as if he were giving a business presentation. First, I needed to establish your connection to the cabin. That was easy. We'd spent so much time there over the years. Your fingerprints were already everywhere. The trick was making it look like you'd been there recently with Lucas, the witness who saw my car. Paid off, of course. Though technically, they did see your car that night. I just happened to be the one driving it. His smile widened slightly. Amazing what you can do with a good wig and some careful timing. The text messages? Child's play. You never did change your passwords, Sophie. Even after I caught you with him. I spent weeks crafting those messages, building a digital trail of your supposed plans to meet at the cabin. The police's tech team verified they came from your phone, your normal locations. Perfect digital breadcrumbs. Sophia's hands clenched into fists. And the charity gala? Your alibi? My masterpiece. Pride crept into Sebastian's voice. 200 witnesses, including the mayor and half the city council. Photos, videos, social media posts, all carefully orchestrated to prove I couldn't possibly have been at the cabin. I made sure to speak with every important guest, appear in countless pictures. The mayor even mentioned me in his speech. A generous donation has a way of making people remember you fondly. While you were really dealing with Lucas? Sebastian's expression darkened. Oh, I was at the gala, just not for the entire evening. It's amazing how many people will swear they saw you somewhere if you make enough appearances early in the night and again at the end. The human mind fills in the gaps, assumes you were there the whole time. And between those appearances, I paid Lucas a visit. Sebastian's voice turned clinical, detached. He was surprised to see me at first. Thought I wanted to talk, to work things out like civilized men. He actually apologized, if you can believe it. Said he never meant for things to go so far. Sophia closed her eyes, trying to block out the images his words conjured. Stop. But you wanted to know? Sebastian pressed on. You wanted to hear exactly what happened. How I made him understand that his death would be your destruction. How each piece of evidence I planted would ensure you spent the rest of your life in prison. Why not just kill me instead? Because death would be too quick, too merciful. His voice carried genuine emotion for the first time. I wanted you to live, Sophie. To wake up every morning in this cell, knowing that your choices led you here. To watch as the world forgets you, as your youth fades, as everything you valued slips away. A guard approached their table. 5 minutes. Sebastian nodded, then turned back to Sophia. Sign the papers. Let's make this official. And if I refuse, then I'll wait. His smile returned, cold and satisfied. I have all the time in the world, after all. You're not going anywhere. Someone will figure it out, Sophia said, hating the desperation in her voice. Eventually, someone will see through your act. My act? Sebastian stood, straightening his tie. You mean my role as the devoted husband? Standing by you despite your infidelity? Supporting you through the trials? He shook his head. I played that part perfectly. Everyone sees exactly what I want them to see. The wounded spouse. Try to do the right thing. The perfect performance, Sophia spat. Is that what matters to you? Fooling everyone? What matters is justice. Sebastian's voice hardened. You made me watch as you destroyed our marriage, as you flaunted your affair, as you treated 15 years together like they meant nothing. Now I get to watch you lose everything. Your freedom, your dignity, your future. He gathered his briefcase, then paused. You know what the best part is? The truth is right there in plain sight. The quiet husband's revenge, orchestrated down to the smallest detail. But nobody will ever believe it, because nobody ever really saw me. They saw what I wanted them to see, just like you did. You won't get away with this forever. I already have. Sebastian's expression softened into something almost pitying. You made me feel like I was nothing, Sophie. Now you get to be nothing. Just another inmate, another casualty of her own bad choices. That's what everyone will remember. Not the woman you were, but the murderer you're believed to be. He turned to leave, then looked back one final time. Enjoy your new life, Sophie. I hear the next few decades can feel very long in here. The guard led Sophia back to her cell. She sat on her bunk, the divorce papers clutched in her trembling hands. Through the small window, she could see a patch of sky, the same sky she'd once taken for granted. Back when freedom was as natural as breathing, evening fell, bringing with it the hollow sounds of prison life winding down. In her mind, she could see Sebastian driving home to their house, sleeping in their bed, living the life she'd thrown away. While she remained here, trapped not just by physical bars but by the web of evidence he'd so carefully woven, she thought about the quiet man she'd married, the one she'd dismissed as boring and weak. How wrong she'd been. Behind that mild-mannered facade had lurked something dark and patient, something capable of planning and executing the perfect crime. The reality of her situation crashed over her in waves. Sebastian had orchestrated the perfect revenge, not just taking Lucas from her, but destroying her entire life. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every subtle detail had been carefully arranged to ensure she'd never see freedom again. Night deepened, bringing no peace. Somewhere down the cell block, a woman began singing softly an old blues song about loss and redemption. Sophia lay on her narrow bed, the divorce papers and sign beside her. Letting the mournful melody wash over her, she closed her eyes, remembering the man she'd married or thought she'd married. The quiet, methodical Sebastian, who documented everything, who noticed every detail, who planned each move with chess-like precision. She'd mistaken his careful nature for weakness, his attention to detail for obsession. Now she understood. Those very qualities had allowed him to craft the perfect revenge, a punishment far more cruel than death. He'd taken everything from her, her freedom, her reputation, her future. And he'd done it so completely, so precisely, that she would never be able to prove the truth outside the prison walls. Sebastian moved on with his life, appearing to the world as a victim who had finally freed himself from a toxic marriage. The true depths of his darkness remained hidden, leaving only Sophia to grapple with the knowledge of what really happened. A truth that would die with her behind these walls, that in the darkness of her cell. Sophia finally understood the full scope of Sebastian's revenge. He hadn't just wanted her to suffer. He'd wanted her to live with that suffering, to wake each morning knowing she would spend the rest of her life paying for her betrayal. The quiet man she'd underestimated had orchestrated her complete destruction. And now she would spend decades living with the consequences of her fatal mistake, not the affair itself, but believing that Sebastian's calm exterior meant he was weak. She hadn't recognized the patient, calculating predator beneath his mild-mannered facade until it was far too late. The sound of the evening guard check echoed through the cell block. Sophia looked at the divorce papers one last time, then slowly, deliberately, began to sign her name. Each letter felt like another nail in the coffin of her former life. Sebastian had won. Not just her imprisonment, but the complete destruction of everything she'd been. Her reputation, her freedom, her future all gone, orchestrated by the man she'd foolishly thought she knew. Outside, life continued. Sebastian would go home, sleep soundly, wake to his freedom, while she remained here, trapped in the cage he'd so carefully constructed, living the nightmare he designed especially for her. The perfect revenge, served cold and calculated, by a man everyone believed incapable of such darkness. In the end, that was Sebastian's true masterpiece, not just destroying her life, but doing it so completely that no one would ever believe the truth.